In today's episode, we shall take up the 6 different books of accounts that a business engaged in sale of goods must have, namely, Cash Receipts Journal, Cash Disbursement Journal, Sales Journal, Purchases Journal, General Journal, and General Ledger. For better appreciation, we shall take up the use or purpose of each of the books of accounts and show you an example of the transaction and how it is recorded therein. The first book on our list is Cash Receipt Journal. This is a special journal used to record cash sales collections and collection of receivables and other business-related transactions involving receipt of cash. This is an example of the Cash Receipts Journal. Please take note that the journal must provide separate columns for date, particulars or description, reference hash, debit cash on hand, or cash in bank, and credit accounts receivable, and/or notes receivable if applicable. The particulars or description shall include the date and reference number of supporting documents like invoice number 11, name of the customer or payer, nature of transaction like cash or credit sales, name of items like merchandise, quantity, unit price, and total amount. The column for reference number shall indicate the bank and check number if a check is received instead. Number 2, Cash Disbursement Journal. This is a special journal used to record cash payments such as for services or goods purchased for sale, expenses, payable, debts or liabilities, and other business-related transactions involving disbursements of cash. This is an example of the Cash Disbursement Journal. Please take note that the journal must provide separate columns for date, particulars or description, reference number, debit accounts payable, and/or notes payable and credit cash on hand or cash in bank if paid through a check. The particulars or description shall include the date and reference number of supporting documents like invoice number 21, name of the supplier or payee, nature of transaction like cash or credit purchase, name of item or merchandise, quantity, unit price, and total amount. The column for reference number shall indicate the bank and check number if payment is done through a check. Number 3, Purchase Journal. This is used to record all purchases both in cash and on credit. The purchases recorded here do not only refer to merchandise for sale but all other procurements of the entity where an obligation or liability is recorded, such as but not limited to recording rent, light, and power, water, etc. A separate column for each type of transaction shall be provided for easier identification. This is an example of a purchase journal. In a manual setup, to easily quantify the amounts of cash purchases and credit purchases, a separate column is provided for each of these categories, whereas those using a system may provide a separate account distinguishing one from the other, like debiting an account merchandise inventory in cash and merchandise inventory on credit. Both accounts will have the same credit account of accounts payable or notes payable as the case may be, to avoid double entry of cash disbursement, because the cash on hand or cash in bank account will be recorded as a credit in the Cash Disbursement Journal with the debit account of accounts payable or notes payable as the case may be, to close the appropriate payable account setup in this book. Number 4, Sales Journal. This is used to record all sales both in cash and on credit. The sales transaction of a duly registered entity is supported or documented by a sales invoice which is issued to its customers. The invoice is the basis for recording the sale transaction. This is an example of the sales journal. In a manual setup, to easily quantify the amounts of cash sales and credit sales, a separate column is provided for each of these categories, whereas those using a system may provide a separate account distinguishing one from the other, like using an account sales, cash, and sale, credit. Both the account will have the same debit account of account receivable or notes receivable, as the case may be, to avoid double entry of cash received, because cash on hand or cash in bank account will be recorded as a debit in Cash Receipts Journal with the credit account of accounts receivable or notes receivable as the case may be, to close the appropriate receivable account setup in this book. Number 5, General Journal. For organizations using the set of 6 books of accounts, this is a catch-all journal, meaning transactions other than those that are recorded in the 4 books of accounts previously discussed are recorded in this book of accounts. This is referred to as the Book of Original Entry. This is an example of the General Journal. It records the business transactions in the order of dates they transpired or happened. Some of the transactions that are recorded here are depreciation, amortization, reclassification of accounts, and other adjusting entries. Number 6, General Ledger. This is referred to as the Book of Final Entry. It records all the journal entries of all account titles appearing on all the 5 books of accounts to get the ending balances. This book is arranged in the order or sequence that the account titles appear in the chart of accounts. While the entries in each of the account titles are arranged chronologically or by the dates they appear in the different books of accounts. This is an example of general ledger. Please take note that all the information found in the corresponding book of accounts where the journal entries were originally or initially recorded are taken up in this book. The information includes the reference number of supporting documents, item name, etc. At the end of each accounting period, usually every end of the month, all the columns in each of the 6 books of accounts are summed up or the total of each column is indicated therein. This is to check compliance with the accounting equation.